Okay, so two things. One, I got the fan on the lowest level because it's really freaking hot. And two, I'm eating some watermelon. So, those may be two distractions during this reaction video, but we are going to be reacting to the creepy murder in room 1046. So let's begin with it. 3, 2, 1, play.
This week on Buzzfeed Unsolved, we covered the creepy death of Roland T. Owen. I gotta say, this one really gives me the willies.
Gives a little goose pimples?
Yeah, I don't like it. I read about this one at night, much like some of you watched this at night. And
Yeah, it's not smart at all.
some of the small details. There's things in this that just
Ruffles your jimmies.
ruffles my feathers.
Ruffles your feathers.
Ruffles or rustles, they could be either.
I don't know.
What are jimmies?
Alright.
Well, rustling, you could like rustle through the brush.
Agree to disagree.
Sure, whatever.
On Wednesday, January 2nd, 1935, around 1:20 p.m., a man calling himself Roland T. Owen checked into the hotel President in Kansas City.
Basically, when you get like a
Witnesses said he
really
was
old crime
anywhere
case,
from
it's probably not going to be
25
solved.
With brown hair, a scar on his scalp visible above his ear, and a cauliflower ear. He was nicely dressed in a black coat. The bellboy, Randolph Probst, helped Owen to his room, where he reported that Owen seemed to have only packed a brush, comb, and toothpaste. The maid, Mary Soapdick.
What's her name?
Oh God, I know what she's a her name is Soap Dick.
I'm trying to
move. What a really funny big laugh you got out of that. Look how happy you are.
And if you're an Ives, this joke's on Dick.
The comedy we mined here today.
The maid, Mary Soapdick, said Owen allowed her to clean while he was in the room, but asked that she not lock the door.
Did you guys hear about that post about how what avocados taste like?
Soapdick said that
That makes
Owen
me dislike avocados even more.
and the lights off, with the exception of one dim lamp. Other staff members who entered the room also mentioned this detail.
I don't want to be in a room when they're in there. That's scary.
Yeah.
I
So he
imagine him
has-
just sitting in a chair in the corner, just a shadow man. Clean it. Clean the room.
I think you're getting Anton Chigurh vibes from this guy.
Fluff the pillow.
According to the maid Soapdick's statement to the police, she felt that Owen was, quote, either worried about something or afraid, end quote. And that, quote, he always wanted to kind of keep in the dark, end quote. At 4 p.m., Soapdick returned with new towels, finding Owen laying on the bed, completely dressed, in the dark, with the door unlocked. She also
Yeah,
saw
maybe
a
he
note
was
that
like
read,
trying
quote,
to.
Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait.
I think just like staying in the dark might be a sensory sort of thing.
You in the vein?
No.
Like,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
think
sensory
that's a-
deprivation chambers?
If you see a guy
That's the vibe I kind of get from it.
dark, awake, just like looking at you, I think that's your cue to leave.
The next day, on January 3rd, Soapdick came back to clean the room at 10:30 a.m. She noticed that the door had been locked from the outside and assumed that Owen locked it as he was leaving the room. However, Owen was sitting inside, again with the lights off, which meant that someone else had locked the door from outside the room. While Soapdick was still in the room, Owen answered a phone call and said, quote, no, Dawn, I don't want to eat. I am not hungry. I just had breakfast, end quote. Repeating, quote, no, I am not hungry, end quote.
What hotels allow you to lock a room from the outside?
This hotel did.
Weird. I would imagine you could just call the front desk and say, hey,
I'm locked in my
let me
room.
out of here.
It's just my thought is who is this person that's locking him in the room, or who is he waiting for that he's sitting in obedience in the dark?
Well, if this guy's a weirdo to begin with, he's got weird friends.
Okay, I guess that's fair.
Weird attracts weird.
Soapdick came back around 4 p.m. to deliver fresh towels. She heard two male voices from inside the room. When she knocked, she heard a rough voice say, quote, who is it, end quote. When she explained that she had fresh towels, the man said, quote, we don't need any, end quote. Even though there were no towels left in the room. During the night, a woman staying in room 1048 would report hearing loud voices, both male and female, cursing on the same floor. Though, there was apparently a party going on that night in room 1055. Now things begin to get very strange. The next morning, on January 4th, around 7 a.m., the hotel phone operator noticed that Owen's hotel room phone had been off the hook for a while without being in use. So, she sent the bellboy Probst upstairs to 1046. Despite the locked door having a don't disturb sign, Probst knocked a few times and heard a low voice say, quote, come in, turn on the lights, end quote. However, the door was locked, and no one was getting up to let him in. So after knocking repeatedly, Probe said, quote, "Put the phone back on the hook," end quote, assuming that Owen was drunk. Around 8:30 a.m., about an hour and a half later, the phone was still off the hook, and another bellboy, Harold Pike, let himself into the room with a passkey. Using only the light from the hall, the bellboy Pike observed that Owen was in bed, naked, and seemingly drunk. He also noticed that the bedding was darkened around Owen. The phone stand was kicked over, so he fixed it and put the phone back in the receiver.
They went in there and they saw this person on the bed, like dark stains all around them. And were
Possibly
like,
blood.
those are your sheets.
He's obviously making himself into a Sunday. Nothing to see here.
Right.
Let's go back down to the front
Don't
desk.
just leave. Stupid.
At approximately 10:30 to 10:45 a.m., the phone was once again out of the receiver. They sent the original bellboy Probst to resolve the situation. When he opened the door, he stumbled upon a truly horrific scene. Here's his statement to the police. Quote,
Might have been calls for
"When I
help.
entered the room,
Cries for
this
help.
man was within 2 feet of the door on his knees and elbows, holding his head in his hands. I noticed blood on his head. I then turned the light on. I looked around and saw blood on the walls, on the bed, and in the bathroom. This frightened me, and I immediately left the room and went downstairs." End quote.
It seems like everyone kept checking in to be like, let's make sure nothing horrible is happening here. Well, seems like it might be. We'll give it another hour. And then an hour later, okay, yep.
This
everything's
murder's
fine.
not ripe yet. It's not ripe yet for the Also, the way they found him,
Imagining that is truly horrifying.
he said he was within 2 feet of the door on his knees and his elbows, holding his head in his hands.
Like,
Not like that. He's not taking glamour shots.
Nice of you to
Might have been like this.
I'm dying. Blood.
Owen was discovered with extensive injuries. He had been tied up with a cord around his neck, wrists, and ankles. It appeared he had been tortured. Blood had even gotten on the wall and ceiling above the bed.
I'm a little tired of people being so aghast that blood is on the walls and the ceiling. Of course.
You
it's
ever heard
gonna
about
be
traces of
everywhere.
spray?
That person is beating the shit out of someone and stabbing
Yeah.
them.
It's also, I mean, come on, it's a visceral thing.
I mean, if you're getting murdered, you probably have high blood pressure at the time, so that'd be
Well, that's what happens. If you put your finger in a cup of blood and just went,
Okay, wait a
there's
second.
blood on the ceiling.
Wait, what?
He had been hit repeatedly on the head and his skull was fractured. He'd also been stabbed in the chest several
What does
times.
sliver color
His
fixed,
lung was
not
punctured.
fixed
There
mean?
was bruising around his neck that could mean he was strangled. Remarkably, Owen was somehow still alive though. One of the detectives to arrive on the scene would ask Owen about anyone else who had been inside the room. Owen responded, quote, "Nobody."
Nobody.
Although he was hardly capable of talking and not fully conscious. He explained, quote, "I fell against the bathtub."
No, you did not.
Hell of a fall.
I mean, you did come
in
back
this
to the
scenario,
bathtub, but
he
not
falls against
by
the
falling.
bathtub, rolls over into the bed, and then starts bouncing up and down so the blood splatter goes onto the ceiling and walls.
Yeah. And probably bouncing on the bed so hard that he hits the ceiling a few times and breaks all his bones.
Fractures his skull.
Yeah.
You know, I bounced my head off the bathtub and I thought I'd go for a little bounce in the bed.
Jesus Christ. And tied himself up somehow?
After this brief exchange, he was completely unconscious and was taken to the hospital. According to a doctor, the injuries on Owen's body had occurred 6 to 7 hours prior
What does
to Owen
laced
being
mean?
discovered.
It's a long time to bleed.
That means that by the time when they first went to go check on him, when the phone was first off the hook, he was already injured at that point. He was already bleeding out. And still said, "Come in, turn on the lights." Unless, of course, it wasn't him. It was Don waiting to do more murdering.
Detectives found no weapon, nor any of Owen's belongings in the room, therefore removing suicide from the equation. 4 fingerprints were found on the phone stand, potentially from a female. Owen would die after midnight on
How
January
do they know this
5th
from a
at the
girl?
hospital. When Owen initially checked into the hotel, he mentioned he was from Los Angeles, but Los Angeles authorities were unable to find any record of a Roland T. Owen, bringing into question whether that was the victim's real name. His body was placed for viewing at Melody McGilley Funeral Home. As the story spread, more and more people began reaching out to Kansas City authorities to see if their missing loved one could be Owen, to no avail. Next, police focused on the mysterious Don, that Owen referred to several times while at the hotel. Don was also conceivably the man with the deep voice that the maid heard through the hotel door. Nevertheless, the police's search returned no results. Owen's upcoming burial was announced by the Journal Post on March 3rd to be in a potter's field. However, the Melody McGilly Funeral Home received a call from an anonymous individual who said they would send the money necessary for providing Owen with a proper funeral.
Oh, that was kind of nice.
And my suspicion of what if it's Don? Here,
And
because like
Don is a very...
Or it could have just been a good Samaritan in that case.
I mean, there's two reasons why he would not give up.
I mean, there have been cases there have been instances of like police departments getting enough money to like make a headstone for Jane or John Doe.
Why would he pay for his funeral if he killed him? Or like, and if it wasn't the killer who's paying for the funeral, why wouldn't that person just step forward and be like, yeah, that's fucking Jerry?
Right. The plot thickens.
It does indeed.
This is a thick-ass plot.
This one's thick,
The plot is thick as hell.
juicy. This is a juicy peach.
Oh, it's a juicy peach, all right. And I got juice.
And here's a napkin.
Sure enough, on March 23rd, money, bundled in a newspaper, was delivered to the funeral home from an anonymous...
That's a weird way to send money.
Flowers were anonymously arranged with the Rock Flower Company, along with a card that said, quote, "Love forever, Luis," end quote, placed on Owen's grave.
You know, I'm just going to start sending flowers to people's funerals and say, "Love forever, Luis."
You should just say love forever, Shane, and a picture of yourself. Like that.
But then people are going to ask me questions like, "Why'd you do that?" And I'd say, "It's a funny joke." And they'd say, "This is a funeral, you know."
Skipping forward about a year and a half later, in 1936, a friend of Ruby Ogletree found an American weekly piece chronicling the Owen case. Upon looking at the magazine, Ruby would correctly identify Owen as her son, who left Birmingham
What the hell?
in 1934. Owen's actual name was Artemis Ogletree, and he was only 17 years old.
Sounds like a Harry Potter boy.
What?
That sounds like a
Yeah,
little,
it does sound like a Harry Potter name.
Artemis
Sounds like a
Fowl.
fantasy name.
Oh, okay. I thought you were referring to the context of the case. It sounds like the story of Harry Potter.
No, things turned out better for him.
Yeah, I think he went on to great happy adventures.
Yeah, he wasn't brutally murdered in a hotel room. That would be a rough end to that tale.
Ruby Ogletree, his mother, had actually received 3 letters from her son in the spring of 1935. However, these letters were delivered after Owen's death and were typed. According to a sensational newspaper account of the murder case, this was especially suspicious because Artemis didn't know how to type. This article also reported that the letter's tone was
Unless
quote,
someone typed
slangy and
for him.
unfamiliar, end quote, to Ruby.
Like he had a ghost
Isn't it
typer.
weird back then that you could just pretend to
Like
be
he had
someone?
someone
You could still do that
that
today.
would type while he already
I
did
can
it.
check into a hotel right now and say
He
name
did
is,
word for word.
Ricky Goldsworth.
But then they're going to say, oh, "Do you have a credit card, sir?"
And I'll be like, oh yeah, this is my my friend. I'm just putting that. It's just a deposit,
That's
right?
not
You're
going to
gonna
fly. They're going to put handcuffs on you right away. Where'd you grow up, Ricky Goldsworth?
Oh, I grew up down the road.
Where? No. What city?
Oh, New York City.
You grew up in New York
This is
City.
happening in New York now.
What's your mother's name, Ricky Goldsworth?
Lucy Goldsworth.
What's her maiden name?
Lucy Gold.
See, crumbling.
Well, I wouldn't stumble like that. I'd have a prepared response.
You'd be firing them off.
Yeah.
Firing him off, and I'd be like, what's the fucking holdup? I'm trying to check into a room, and you're giving me a goddamn inquisition? Is this how you treat all your customers?
All right.
Who do you think you are?
That's fair.
Huh?
Okay,
and I
that's
poke
fair.
him in the chest like this. Huh?
At this point,
Huh,
I'm giving
Buster?
you a room. All right? You did it. You win. You win, Ricky.
After some time, it was revealed that Artemis Ogletree had also stayed at the St. Regis in Kansas City with another man, possibly Don. In the early 2000s, Dr. John Horner, the author of an exhaustive account of the murder case published by the Kansas City Public Library, received an out-of-state call about Artemis Ogletree. The caller claimed to find a box containing newspaper articles about the Ogletree murder in a deceased elderly person's belongings. According to the caller, there was something else in the box, something else that had apparently been referenced in the newspaper articles. Unfortunately, the caller did not say what that item was. After that, the case would have no further revelations and would disappear into obscurity. And with that, let's get into the theories. The first theory is rather simple, that the man referred to as Don beat Artemis Ogletree to death in room 1046 and acted alone.
Ow.
As mentioned before, it came to light that shortly before
Sorry, I
his
think
death,
there was a bug that
Ogletree
bit
stayed
me.
in a different Kansas City hotel with another man, possibly Don. Don was also conceivably the man with the deep voice that the maid heard through the hotel door. But even if this theory is true, the police were never able to figure out who Don actually was. The second theory is that the unknown Don didn't act alone. This theory relates to an observation by Charles Blocker, the elevator operator the night of the murder. His observation also perhaps sheds a little light onto who Dawn could be. The night of the murder, Blocker saw a, quote, commercial woman, end quote, going to the
The
10th
fuck's a
floor.
commercial
The
woman?
elevator operator estimated that the woman was 135 pounds and about 5.5 feet tall. She had dark hair and was wearing a, quote, coat of black Hudson seal or imitation Hudson seal, end quote.
What is the commercial? What a commercial woman?
She would look like she was dressed in
Exactly.
clothing, so they called her commercial woman.
What?
Anyways, I didn't make up the name. That's what they called
She
her.
looked like the Pine Sol lady.
30s, what the
She
hell?
was hanging out with the Brawny guy. It was
She was
her.
next to a big, tall, bald man in a white T-shirt.
Yeah, it was her, Brawny, and Mr. Queen. They all went and they just went off on adventures.
Blocker claimed this woman was looking for room
It was
1046
Mr. Clean who committed the
and
crime.
was able to find. It's possible that this woman was looking for Ogletree and had mistaken room 1046 for 1026. This commercial woman was also seen with a man from the 9th floor, a man that the elevator operator said was the same height and weight as the woman. Some speculate that this man could have been Dawn. If you'll recall, there were fingerprints, potentially from a female, found on the phone stand, and a woman staying next door in room 1048 reported hearing loud female and male voices cursing. So it wouldn't be unreasonable to suspect that this commercial woman and the man from the 9th floor could have been responsible for what happened to Artemis Ogletree. However, there is nothing official on the woman or the man beyond what little is on the internet and my own personal speculation. The third theory comes from many sensational articles published in the following years that suggested
Dang it, now I got the
Ogletree
hiccups.
was unfaithful to his fiancée. I'd like to call to mind the announcement in the Journal Post that Ogletree would be buried in a potter's field. The announcement that appeared to prompt an anonymous caller to fund Ogletree's funeral, according to a sensational article published in the Newcastle Sun called Mystery Murder in Room 1046. That sequence of events went a little differently. The article states that a woman called the local paper to say, quote, "You have a story in your paper that is wrong.
There's
Roland
nothing to learn
Owen
on
will
that.
not be buried in a pauper's grave. Arrangements have been made for his funeral." End quote.
I'm gonna start using it.
A pauper's grave?
Well, just a poppers as sort of a descriptor. Like if I get a subpar salad,
Oh, you get this is a pauper salad.
I will not eat this popper salad.
Or if you get like a hotel room that just has a view of the parking lot or the freeway, I'm not gonna sit in this pauper's hotel room.
Front desk, yes. I will not accept this popper's view.
This is Ricky Goldsworth. You know what the deal is. Do you want me to come down there again? Didn't think so.
Man, that guy's scary.
Yeah, he's really scary.
When asked to identify herself and what actually happened to the man still known as Owen at the time, she replied, quote, "Never mind. I know what I'm talking about. He got into a jam." End quote, before hanging up the phone. At the same time, a man called the funeral parlor where Owen was held and said, quote, "Don't bury Owen in a pauper's grave. I want you to bury him in Memorial Park Cemetery. Then he will be near my sister. I'll send funds to cover the funeral expenses." End quote.
These people hate paupers.
I think maybe that may have been slang for the time.
It was it?
I mean, it seems, unless these two
Don't
people
they
just
still
love
use
their
it?
paupers. Either way, the more important detail to mine from that is
Sister's
the fact
grave.
that Sister's grave.
Did they look into the cemetery and see?
Or
what
about,
kind-
we're gonna get into that.
Great.
Well, kinda.
The man apparently explained that Owen had jilted a girl he was engaged to, and that in room 1046, Owen the man and the jilted girl had a, quote, "little meeting," end quote. Before hanging up, he said, quote, "Cheaters usually get what's coming to them," end quote. Shortly after, the Rock Floral Company received a call asking for, quote, 13 American Beauty roses sent to Roland Owen's funeral, end quote. The voice added, quote, "I'm doing this for my sister," end quote.
These poor people at this funeral home are just trying to make a nice little occasion for this brutally murdered man, and they have just this cartoonish cast of characters calling them up to deliver these grisly, grim messages.
playing-
If I'm working at that home, I'm getting fed up.
You wanna come do the job? You wanna do my job? How about I be you and you be me?
Show up! Why don't you bury them, asshole? Stop just calling me. I'm busy.
It's fucking annoying.
You know how hard it is to reconstruct this man's skull?
Other than that, the mysterious death of Artemis Ogletree
Yeah,
has left
body
the
reconstruction's
dust
kinda
in the
hard.
minds of investigators, with no other possible leads or clues. To this day, it is unknown what truly happened in hotel room 1046. Was Ogletree held prisoner? Was he actually punished for cheating on his fiancée? The case will unfortunately remain unsolved.
Unsolved.
After I read about this case, I was in a weird headspace, so I watched clips of people falling on YouTube to go to sleep.
You watched people falling
Yeah, like a
down.
compilation of people falling down. That's what I
Like
did.
Fail
Weird
Army.
way to make yourself
Well,
feel
you
good.
know what? Better to think about that than think about a guy in prayer hands, bloodied on the floor. On his hands and knees. To death. All right, well, that's that.
You think they cleaned that hotel after?
Sure. Oh, that maid probably had to clean
Yeah.
it.
I don't even think about that.
Anyways,
They had
come on
to
now.
hire extra maids. Alright, so I think that this case is probably never going to get solved, and I hope that the fan didn't bother you too much. I will see you guys in the next one.